As war between Israel and Hamas rages, violence and hate has escalated here at home, shaking both Jewish and Palestinian communities in the U.S. In Illinois, a 6-year-old Palestinian boy was stabbed to death by the landlord of the apartment he was living in, and police believe it was a hate crime. Across the country, swastikas have appeared in protests, and hate speech against Jews have soared on social media. And that's only added to the ongoing fear among Jewish communities across the country, who have again were the target of far more hate crimes last year than any other religious group. That's according to FBI data. So joining me tonight with more on how all of this is affecting American Jewish and Palestinian communities and how the country can push back are the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League, Rabbi Jonah Steinberg, and Imad Harb, the director of research and analysis at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., and a former professor of Middle East Studies at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Rabbi, I want to start with you. You know, we've seen this data come out of the FBI and, of course, analysis by the ADL. When we see the devastating events like we saw recently in Gaza, how does your organization and others sort of prepare for what could be an uptick in hate crime and hate speech?
Well, it certainly is, Crystal, and with due respect for the difference, just as we don't know the full numbers of casualties in Israel and in Gaza, we do not yet know what all the echoes will be on this side of the sea. As you mentioned, last year, our New England region saw a dramatic increase in anti-Semitic incidents, and in Massachusetts, for instance, we saw a 41% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. And to give you a sense of what that is, that's 152 incidents that we tracked in 2022, by contrast to 108 the year previous and 73 to the year previous to that. But this is a horrific time, Crystal, for Jewish community, but also I'm sure for Dr. Harb's community. We saw in our Boston area a Palestinian cultural center deface in a really vile instance of what we understand to be a hate crime. And we called that out because nothing makes hate right.
Dr. Harb, when you hear these stories like the one in Illinois we're mentioning, the one locally that Rabbi Steinberg mentioned, I mean, in your experience, is it a scenario in which you're playing out in your head? How do we prepare the communities that we represent and serve, and how do we get education out for folks?
What happened in Illinois is really very devastating to the family, and the poor child was dead because of feelings of hatred and basically xenophobia. The communities, communities of color in general are always under attack. Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, Jews. Unfortunately, this has become almost like a trend in American society, and that is truly disappointing. America is supposed to be the place where everybody really enjoys their life in happiness and the pursuit of happiness. Things like this have a lot of political connotations as well. I mean, we need to know how to talk to each other. We need to know how to educate the public. The media is definitely very, very responsible to what reaches the public. And, a responsible media would produce a responsible and knowledgeable audience. But also the audience has the responsibility of also looking to see, where is right, what is right and what is wrong, and act accordingly.
Well, speaking of media coverage, I mean, I'm going to ask you both this. What do you make of the media coverage so far, and how do you think it's affecting the response in our local communities? And Rabbi, I'll start with you.
Just the horrific images that we are seeing of slaughter in Israel, of the way in which Israel's response, of course, impacts people who are not part of Hamas, who are living in Gaza. These are horrific images to see. That does not excuse people acting out of a place of violence that is provoked by those images.
Dr. Harb?
What is really emerging is a very, very ugly picture of the human condition in the Middle East between Israel and the Gaza Strip. This is really it's very, very bad for coexistence. It really reflects badly on how we manage conflict. There's the killing of civilians should be condemned by everyone. And what is going on today is just simply a continuation of hatred, and it should stop right away.
What is it like watching that from afar and then living in a community that may not understand those ties, Dr. Harb?
It's very, very difficult. It's difficult to you walk out your front door and you're wondering whether somebody is going to be attacking you verbally or bodily. By the way, this is unfortunately, this happened in September 11 after the terrible events of September 11, and it continues now. I think that politicians should also play a part here. Politicians sometimes use these occasions to just advance their interests, and that's something that really should not be tolerated.
Rabbi Steinberg, I know that we have certainly heard many stories, many Jewish stories out of the area, the Gaza Strip, and the region at large. I mean, how do folks in your community manage that, being here in the U.S.?
There are so many connections between Jewish community in the United States and around the world with Jewish community and with others in Israel, ties of family, ties of friendship, people we went to school with, people who are professional colleagues. And so the experience has been of the degrees of distance collapsing by the day and sometimes by the minute as we reach out to make contact with our friends in Israel, and in some instances with our friends who identify as Palestinian.
So we've seen protests in Arlington, in Boston, on college campuses, right? In New York City and in other parts of the country. Folks both wanting to elevate voices, elevate communities, and things like that. How do municipal governments and administrations of institutions that are trying to manage a dialogue or trying to be on the right side of this conversation, in whatever that looks like, what are the best practices in those spaces? And Dr. Harb, I'll ask you first.
They definitely have a responsibility of educating about the real facts, not the alternative facts that were mentioned a few years back. Administrators in universities and politicians and on the local level, on the federal level, on the state level, everywhere should be responsible for trying to educate people. We cannot stop somebody from protesting because we disagree with their point of view. But at the same time, we should always emphasize the fact that, it's good to have your point of view, but also it's good to have a rational point of view, a point of view that really has the facts behind it. And definitely we have First Amendment concerns. Everybody should be allowed to express their points of view, also.
Rabbi, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, well, I agree that education is vitally important. I agree that in this country, freedom of speech is a value that we cherish. It is horrific when people abuse that freedom of speech to intimidate others. Not every speech act of hate is a hate crime. But when you ask about the role of local government, it is very important that they do identify actual hate crimes and prosecute those fully, because that also conveys a message to the community about what is tolerable and what simply cannot be tolerated.
Is that statement need to be as clear as possible in municipalities like in the town? Like, do towns need to come out with statements when anything like this happens, Rabbi?
Well, Yeah, well, I can say it has been heartening to see elected officials show up at community gatherings and speak this week. And of course, all of them are speaking against hate. I hope their words are reaching the audiences that need most to hear them. Very often it is the communities in pain that are gathered around to hear the elected officials speak. And we know that hate is wrong. The elected officials too, I think, and Dr. Harb is right about this, have to think in their elected roles how one educates and influences community and how one counters hate.
We have to hope that those statements are enough. Thank you so much, Dr. Harb and Rabbi Steinberg. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.